8 o'clock. This is Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio for Tuesday, May 16th. I'm Todd Moe. Monica Sandreski has the day off. Before Title 42 expired, Customs and Border Protection asked the St. Lawrence County Health Department to help coordinate resources in case they saw a big influx of new arrivals. But the Public Health Department says the influx hasn't materialized. Still,
I think it was good preparation on our part, and I'd rather be prepared and not have it happen than to have it happen and not be ready for it.
Meanwhile, some county leaders are sounding the alarm about a growing migrant crisis that they say the federal government is failing to address.
The federal government is failing to address this crisis. We should have the basic information about the asylum seekers entering the state of New York so we could match housing needs, work needs, public assistance needs.
Karen DeWitt brings us more on that story. Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River are unlikely to flood this spring, and we'll hear about a new acquisition at the Hyde Collection in Glens Falls. All that's coming up on Northern Light. Stay tuned. Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Adirondack Foundation and the Adirondack Birth to Three Alliance, dedicated to providing all children the best possible start in life, AdirondackBT3.org, and by Citizen Advocates, offering the North Country mental health, addiction, and housing services, plus crisis care, job training, and more. CitizenAdvocates.net/124. This is Northern Light. I'm Todd Moe. The pandemic-era border restriction that the federal government lifted last week was popularly called Title 42. St. Lawrence County has two Canadian border crossings, one in Ogdensburg and one in Messina. Before Title 42 expired, Customs and Border Protection asked the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department to help coordinate resources, just in case they saw a big influx of new arrivals. But the Public Health Department says that influx hasn't materialized. Lucy Grindon reports.
In preparation for the end of Title 42, U.S. Customs and Border Protection asked St. Lawrence County to help out if there was a surge in migrants. So local health officials took some supplies up to the border crossings in Ogdensburg and Messina this past December.
Like cleaning supplies, masks, limited medical supplies.
That's Jolene Munger. She's the director of the St. Lawrence County Public Health Department. She says Customs and Border Protection also told the department that they may need to send nurses to do things like administering extra tuberculosis tests and giving extra shots. But now that Title 42 has actually ended, has the Public Health Department been asked for that extra help?
No, we have not. What we've heard is that the traffic at the border has remained steady at the same levels.
All the end of Title 42 means is that normal pre-pandemic asylum policies are back in place, so people who come to this country looking for safety can no longer be immediately turned away because of COVID-19 risk. And those extra arrivals just haven't shown up. Meanwhile, on Friday, the St. Lawrence County Legislature declared a state of emergency because of the Title 42 expiration. Not because there actually is an emergency. The legislative chair said he made the declaration out of an abundance of caution. Munger says it mostly has to do with funding.
So it provides the necessary authorization for the county to receive funding or any reimbursements associated with expenses that may be incurred. Currently, funding was only made available to New York City. So if funding becomes available to the rest of the state, typically counties have to have a state of emergency in place to qualify for that.
Munger says if the county does see an influx of arrivals, the Public Health Department's partners will work with Customs and Border Protection. For example, if Ogdensburg needs medical screenings, doctors at Claxton Hepburn Hospital will provide them. And she doesn't think the preparation they did was too much.
I'd rather be prepared and not have it happen than to have it happen and not be ready for it.
Munger says they're ready to help, but so far they haven't needed to. Lucy Grindon, North Country Public Radio.
Saying it's a national security crisis, some county leaders in New York are sounding the alarm about a growing migrant crisis that they say the federal government is failing to address. Meanwhile, Governor Hochul says she's awaiting answers from the Biden administration. From Albany, Karen DeWitt has more.
The State Association of Counties, Steve Aquario, says the state's counties are increasingly shouldering the burden of the influx of migrants over the southern border, a situation that's likely to intensify now that pandemic-era restrictions on border crossings have been lifted. And he says they need help now. They say the federal government should consider declaring a state of emergency and immediately release funds to states like New York that are bearing the brunt of the crisis.
The current situation is failing. The federal government is failing to address this crisis. We should have the basic information about the asylum seekers entering the state of New York so we could match housing needs, work needs, public assistance needs, mental health needs, legal concerns.
The counties are asking the federal government to open military bases to house and feed the migrants. They say state government leaders, including Governor Kathy Hochul, need to step up and help resolve disputes that have arisen between New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, and two Republican-led Hudson Valley counties, Orange and Rockland, where Adams planned to bus migrants to hotels. Rensselaer County Executive Steve McLaughlin, also a Republican, is one of a handful of county leaders who are prohibiting any municipality, hotel, or motel in their county from entering into a contract to house migrants.
To say that there's a plan would be a complete falsehood, because the plan seems to be Eric Adams trying to dictate to the rest of the counties in New York how he's going to do things. And that just means shipping people here without any communication to these county leaders. It's unfair, it's arrogant, and it's completely inhumane to do that.
Aquario, with the Association of Counties, says the group is not blaming Hochul. He says the governor has written a letter to President Joe Biden, with whom she has a close professional relationship, asking for more help. But he says she could do more.
I think the governor is in the position to quarterback this issue now.
Hochul, speaking Monday at an unrelated news conference, says Biden and his aides have not yet answered her letter, written last Friday afternoon, and she's not concerned about that. But she says she's not sitting patiently by because New York City is at a breaking point.
If more time goes on, they'll certainly be hearing from me. I'll be paying a visit, continuing my regular efforts to say, help us here. This is a humanitarian crisis.
Hochul says she's working to coordinate the response between the city and the counties. She's deployed 1,500 National Guard members to help, and she says she's considering adding to the $1 billion that's already in the state budget to help care for the migrants, but so far no one knows what those costs might be. The governor says the counties are not being asked to pay for anything, just to consent to allow hotels in their regions to contract with the city of New York to house the asylum seekers. Hochul says she's also asking the federal government to waive the 100-day waiting period for work authorization. She says the migrants want jobs, and many upstate regions have a worker shortage. She says if they were able to become employed sooner, there'd be far less blowback from some county leaders over their arrival.
The upstate elected officials, who you would normally say perhaps they're not as open to this idea, if you said these individuals were ready to work and could work and go out to the farms and the hotels and the restaurants, their arms would be wide open.
The county leaders say they've also asked Senate Majority Leader and New York Senator Chuck Schumer to waive the 100-day waiting period, but they say so far they haven't received an answer. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
Voters in the North Country and across the state are heading to the polls today to vote on proposed school budgets and school board members. David Albert with the New York State Board, the State School Boards Association, says many of New York's school districts still have some funding left over from federal COVID stimulus dollars, while several have also received state aid increases. He says a budgeting problem is competition to hire with the shortage of teachers and staff.
There's a significant demand for certain positions, particularly teachers, bus drivers, cafeteria workers. So districts are certainly looking to fill those positions. There's a demand for mental health services and staff, so social workers, counselors. So schools are seeking to fill some of those positions and try to address some of the learning gaps that have been caused by the pandemic.
Elbert says overall it's a quiet year for school board races.
We have about 55% of districts that have uncontested board seats. So that means there are fewer candidates than open seats, or there are not enough candidates to fill those open seats.
Most North Country schools are asking voters to approve relatively small budget increases, around 5% or less. Polls are open until 9 o'clock tonight. Get more news all the time on our website at ncpr.org. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It's 11 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe. Monica has the day off. Coming up in just a moment, water levels near peak on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River. We'll get an update. Also, a new acquisition at the Hyde Collection in Glens Falls. And new music. We'll hear a tune by Spencer Brill, who grew up in Saranac Lake, now lives in Brooklyn. He's got a new tune out. Indie artist Spencer Brill, coming up in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Matt Bullwinkle at the piano. You can hear more of Matt's music as part of our Underscore project anytime on our website, ncpr.org/underscore. Northern Light is supported by Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And Morris Hill Lilacs in West Potsdam open weekends in May and by appointment until Labor Day, with more than 30 varieties available. Details at morrishilllilacs.com. After Lake Ontario came inches from flood stage last week, the sun and dry weather have changed the forecast. The lake and the St. Lawrence River are now highly unlikely to flood this spring. David Summerstein reports.
What a difference a week makes. Last week, the North Country and the whole Great Lakes region were coming off a long stretch of heavy rain. And downstream, things weren't any better.
Also a rapid melt of the snowpack in the Ottawa River Basin.
Tony David directs the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's Environment Division in Akwesasne, and he sits on the International Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board that keeps an eye on water levels.
And the Ottawa River Basin is a downstream connecting water body. It's a huge watershed. And the sudden rush of that melting snow resulted in major flooding within the Ottawa River watershed.
To prevent even worse flooding there and further downriver in Montreal, the board started holding back water at the hydropower dam in Messina. That was in accordance with a complex formula spelled out in a U.S.-Canada agreement. The result, though, was rising levels in Lake Ontario, almost an inch a day at one point, bringing the lake close to 248 feet when low-lying areas start to flood.
Which started to signal some concerns, not necessarily guaranteeing that we were heading towards a flood event, but
with forecasts showing a 30% chance of flooding. Worrisome enough that New York State issued an advisory and said it was readying sandbags. But then came this long stretch of sun. And now Lake Ontario appears to be reaching its peak.
And the Ottawa River freshet is post-peak, so we're over the hump, and there's a lot of downstream capacity, so we'll continue to be gradually ramping up the outflows from Lake Ontario.
In the wake of the disastrous flooding in 2017 and 2019, there was a lot of finger pointing. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo sued the International Joint Commission, which oversees Tony David's Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board. Under Governor Kathy Hochul, David says things are better, and this year there was good communication with the DEC and other state agencies.
Now we have people that we know we can call upon and share that information. And that's a great thing.
The board says there's just a 2% chance of flooding now. Not impossible. Weather is unpredictable, but with another relatively mild week of weather in the forecast, highly unlikely this year. David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.
Fire destroyed a 3-generation Carthage business over the weekend. According to the Watertown Daily Times, Simon's Agway on Spring Street sold small animals, gardening products, and supplies for hunting and fishing. It appears the blaze was started by heat lamps in the back of the store. The Times reports that the business is insured. In a Facebook post, the owners thanked emergency responders and said they'd be back to serve the community again soon. A Rochester-based developer wants to turn a former Lewis County elementary school into affordable housing for seniors. According to the Watertown Daily Times, the Cornerstone Group's $21 million project would add a new building to the existing Glenfield Elementary School campus. The structures would hold about 50 apartments whose residents would have access to a community room, fitness center, and other amenities. County lawmakers would need to approve the sale and development of the property. Construction could start in the fall of 2024. A project to convert another former Lewis County elementary school into senior housing is in its final stages. The Times reports that apartments at the Port Leyden portal could be move-in ready by late June or early July. And a popular Plattsburgh marina and restaurant property on Lake Champlain was sold to a Texas-based investor last week. According to the Plattsburgh Press Republican, Ryan Magziner of Atlantic Recreation Group bought the Naked Turtle restaurant and the Plattsburgh Boat Basin, which is frequently used by Canadian boaters. The property was on the market for about 5 years. Prospective buyers had included the city of Plattsburgh in 2021. The paper reports that the buyer and realtor declined to provide the price tag, but the real property records show the property was last assessed at $2.1 million. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio on this Tuesday morning. I'm Todd Moe. Monica Sandreski has the day off. Coming up in just a moment, we're going to check in with Bryn Shockmel, a curator at the Hydes Collection in Glens Falls, about some recent acquisitions. That conversation coming up in a moment. Also, we're going to listen to some new music by a young man who grew up in Saranac Lake. Spencer Brill has a new song out called Hospital Song. We'll listen to that, find out sort of more about the backstory on that tune. That's coming up, and then join us for more of Morning Edition at 8:30. Thanks so much for joining us. The Weather Service says clouds, rain showers today, highs in the 60s across the region, west-southwest winds 5 to 15 miles per hour. Tonight could see temperatures dip back down into the 30s, and then tomorrow, mix of sun and clouds and cooler, highs in the 40s and 50s on Wednesday. Thursday, we'll see temperatures near 60 again. The chances some areas of frost Wednesday into early Thursday morning. Clear skies on Thursday, high around 60. Friday, mostly sunny, highs around 70. And at this point, it looks like temperatures in the 60s for highs right through the weekend, with some scattered showers again on Saturday and Sunday. Right now in Canton, partly cloudy skies and 54 degrees. So most of the art at the Hyde Collection in Glens Falls was collected by museum founder Charlotte Prynes Hyde. But the curators continue to acquire new works to expand and diversify the museum's collection. This summer, they're displaying a group of 10 recent acquisitions. And over the next couple of months on Northern Light, we'll hear from exhibit curator Bryn Schockmel about a few of the pieces. Today, we're starting with one that was bequeathed to the museum by trustee Evelyn Muller. It's an early 20th century oil painting by American painter George Bellows called Freeman Young's Place.
It's a beautiful painting, and what's interesting about it is it's very different from what his more typical works are. So George Bellows was part of the American art movement known as the Ashcan School, which they worked, when you think of Ashcan art, it's mostly sort of gritty scenes of urban life, a lot of paintings of New York City, and just kind of darker color palettes. We have another work by George Bellows that's on display in the house. It's in the upstairs, the east bedroom, and it's a portrait, and it's of an older woman, and she's dressed in black, and it's more typical of his work. And so this painting by George Bellows, it's a landscape, and we have in the foreground some fields with 2 cows and a couple of chickens. We see some buildings, and then in the background we can see the water and the blue sky. And it's very sunny. It's a lot of bright colors, bright greens, bright blues. And so it's just very different from a lot of his other works. It was made later in his career during a time when he was spending summers in Maine.
Yes, because this is from his time at Mantenicus Island, I think, in Maine.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, just the sharp contrast of the work that he's known for. I think of his pieces where there's sort of these very fleshy paintings of men in a boxing ring, and
yes, exactly,
or these cityscapes with laundry hanging. Yes, it's a sharp contrast. It's quite different, and so much, like you're saying, so much more vivid.
So I sort of came across this piece when I was in the vault and looking at all the racks, and it struck me just the colors. It's just so bright and cheery, and the recent acquisition show has a lot of drawings in it, so it's a lot of sort of black and white and browns, and I really wanted something colorful. And this work, when I saw it, I just loved the blues and the greens. It's very sort of good for springtime and nice and cheery.
Bryn Schockmel is the curator of the Hyde's Permanent Collection. She spoke with Monica Sandreski, and the recent acquisitions exhibit is on display through September 17th. 23 minutes past 8. You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. So I want to share some new music by a young man who grew up in the Adirondacks, Saranac Lake, to be specific, and now lives in Brooklyn. Indie artist Spencer Brill has released his debut single. It's called Hospital Song, and it's available on all streaming platforms. It was written during his week-long stay in the hospital with COVID-19 in March of 2020, and it showcases his unique sound. It draws inspiration and elements from music from the early 2000s. As he calls it, it's indie emo rock for elder millennials. Reflecting on his harrowing experience, Spencer Brill uses the song's lyrics and his evocative voice to invite us to join him on a journey of self-discovery and healing. And I want to share this brand new song. His debut single came out earlier this month. It's called Hospital Song. Here's Spencer Brill.
Of smell is lost. I'm barely tasting this applesauce. Weak black coffee in a weaker paper cup. Oh, oh, finding only seconds of sleep. The taste of blood, salty, sweet. Scratchy, sterile sheets tug the dirt on my skin as I'm turned over and over again. Breathe in, breathe out.
Hospital Song, Spencer Brill, his debut single came out earlier this month. You can listen to it again on many streaming platforms. Also visit his website, spencerbrill.com. And shout out to his stellar bandmates as well, Mads, Sarah, and Tom. As Spencer writes, he met them all on Vamper, an app like Tinder, but for musicians, and one could say the dates worked out well. Spencer Brill, Hospital Song, inspired by his COVID-19 experience. 28 minutes past 8, and this is Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. Just want to mention a few calendar events around our region. There's still time to check out Celebrating Flora at Floral Artwork by Adirondack Artists Guild members at the Adirondack Artists Guild Art Gallery on Main Street in Saranac Lake. It's up through the end of the month. Also, Music and Movement in Ogdensburg at the Public Library coming up 11 to noon today. It's a preschool movement and socialization class. There's the Barn Quilt Show at the Frederick Remington Art Museum in Ogdensburg. That's up through May 21st. And also Straw Hatters Community Band Rehearsal in Shazy. This is a North Country tradition for more than 60 years. They're looking for musicians of all ages to join them for the 2023 season. Rehearsals are Tuesday, 7 to 9 through June 20th, and you can check them out at the Shazy Central Rural School Auditorium tonight from 7 to 9. Also, they've got a website, shazymusictheater.org, and that's the Straw Hatters Community Band in Shazy, a 60-year tradition. Join them tonight from 7 to 9. Thanks for listening to Northern Light on this Tuesday, May 16th. Till tomorrow, be well.